All right, welcome back to the Football Talk Squadron. I'm Maul.
And I'm Dutch.
And this is episode 2. So let's just get straight to it. Let's just talk about the elephant in the room. We've got upgraded equipment. It's much better, hopefully, for you at home, you guys watching, listening. It sounds a lot better. It looks a lot better. We realized the shortcomings that we had in episode 1, and we've quickly remedied it. So that's for you guys at home.
I mean, it's one of those ones that I take a step, and it's not that episode 1, I get it, it wasn't as good as it is right now, and it's sort of like when you watch a game real time right now, and then you'll be like, oh, like I want to go watch like old Super Bowl and watch the Rams play the Titans, and you're just like, yo, like what film is this? Like you wonder if your TV's broke because it's just like it's sketched, and then there's no first down markers. Like you're just sitting back and you're like, where's all the information that I'm used to? So hopefully this is bringing it back to that level.
Yeah, you wonder if like when we were watching games back then, if we thought that was like high definition. You know, it's like the graphics in video games, how we're like, it'll never get better than this. And then, you know, you look back at it and you're like, oh my gosh, it was terrible.
Oh, kids don't even understand. It's like, go back and watch NFL Blitz and watch these like blocks run around on the screen, and then you go get mad and you're like, dude, this guy's got hair on his face. Like I can see every detail. Although this Madden, I think the new Madden it's been getting some trash reviews. Just I've been watching like a sack happen and the quarterback flies like 20 feet in the air, and you're like, yo, is this going back to what was that, like NFL Streets?
The Blitz? Yeah.
No, not Blitz. It was that one that had, I think it was like Chad Johnson and Ray Lewis. It was like they were actually playing football in the streets.
Yeah, yes. Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
It was just like, you could fight another player like it was great.
Yeah.
Like that was peak video game growing up.
Yeah, my favorite one that I saw was Madden's realistic, and there was like also Madden, and it had the Cowboys winning the Super Bowl, and I was like, I don't think so.
That's the only time in the past 25 years that the Cowboys are getting into the Super Bowl.
Yeah, it's the only way they can win the Super Bowl is through Madden. So full disclosure, we've already filmed this episode. However, because it was on our old equipment, we wanted to make sure that we got full hating Cowboys jokes in the good equipment, on the good sounds, so you guys could enjoy that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, last time when we did record this episode before, there was a thunderstorm, and it happened literally as we were talking about the Cowboys, and even Maul was like, this is just God saying, I hate the Cowboys. Yeah. So there we are.
All right, let's get straight into it. Just like last episode, and as you've seen through our posts, we love to do the Guess the Player, so past and present. So since Dutch gave me the guesses last week, we're going to go flip-flop this time. So let's start with past for you. All right, so I tried to make it not too difficult. I don't want to play Stump the Dummy too early on. So I don't know if they're softballs, but we'll figure it out with Dutch's big brain here. So past. Went to Miami, University of Miami. He was in the 2006 draft.
Heyday in Miami.
Yeah, he played for the Bears, the Falcons,
and who else?
And shoot, I didn't write it down here.
Well, Miami. The thing with Miami is that when you take a look back at that 06, like immediately, like what's coming to mind is you got Shockey, you've got Portis, you got all these guys that are coming out.
All right, I got you here. My bad. I should have been more prepared on this one. All right, so he played for the Bears, was drafted in 2006.
Okay.
Went to the Falcons, the Ravens, and then the Seahawks.
Yeah. Bears, Falcons, Ravens, Seahawks. I'm not gonna lie, you've got me stumped on this one just because all the offensive guys that come to mind.
See, I wrote down all these clues to give you, but I forgot to write down the actual teams he played for, so I had to look it up.
No.
So. All right, so 2006 draft. Let's see. He played more than one position.
Yeah. The only guy that I can see that's not him. I honestly, I don't know.
All right, let me give you a couple other clues here. He only had 36 career touchdowns. However, most people think he should be a Hall of Famer. Only this is probably,
this is Devin Hester.
there you go. I was
There it
gonna
is.
say my next clue is gonna give it away when I said only 16 of those touchdowns
the
were
Hall of-
receiving touchdowns.
And it's not most people. Everyone with a brain. He should have been first ballot, and then he got passed over again in 23. When you look at Devin Hester, in my opinion, if you were to say, hey, you can build any team, you go pick the player to return kickoffs, it's Devin Hester.
Well, I mean, he's what I would equate to like almost like the Barry Bonds of football, where like he's such an impactful one player in a team sport. People were doing things abnormal of the game to avoid him, right?
Yeah.
Like, remember Barry Bonds when he would get up at the plate? It'd be bases loaded, and
And
they would walk him on purpose. They're like, we're going to give up a run just so this dude doesn't hit a grand slam on us. Like, that was Devin Hester. It's like, I don't care if we can pin these guys inside the 5, like with a normal punt. We're going to just straight kick the ball out of bounds because we can't give up the opportunity that this guy runs one back.
And people do hold his stats against him, but it's definitely one of those things that you have to really acknowledge the fact that they were literally kicking out of bounds on plays in order to keep him from getting the ball.
Yep.
And his rookie season is the stuff of legends. I mean, take the opening kickoff of the Super Bowl to the house. Now that it speaks, I think people forget it because of how dominant that Bears defense was, but the fact that you had Rex Grossman at quarterback, which it's the story of the Bears. Like, you go back to Super Bowl 20, like they beat the Patriots 46-10, and why? It was that defense. Like, nothing against Jim McMahon, but at the same time, I think anyone in the Bears organization, like if they had their pick, you could go pick any quarterback in the league.
Same result.
Yeah. It doesn't matter who you got in the position, but no one's sitting back looking at McMahon. So I sit back and look at the same, but Hester, that's a good one. I'm not gonna lie, the Seahawks one got me because the last one that I remember was the Falcons. And outside of that, that's where it gets tough.
I thought it was good because if I'd have just said University of Miami and then like 2006 and Bears, it would have probably been easier. But then you add the Ravens, Falcons, Seahawks on there, and it kind of does throw you a little bit because most people don't remember him. I mean, I know I didn't playing for them.
I just remember him breaking the record of Dion's with the Falcons, and that was the last memory I had of him.
All right, moving on to the present, and I know we've talked about this before, but big time. I just want to see if you remembered it. Where did he go to school? Aaron Jones.
That was UTEP.
Yeah, there you go. Cool.
Which it's funny because UTEP is just like one of those programs that unless like you drive through Texas and you're like, oh, there's that school.
I mean, Conference USA, like most people don't even, know it. It's not one of those things, but he's obviously a prolific player nowadays, and most people don't remember where he went to school.
Oh, 100%. I mean, it's funny because you bring up Aaron Jones, which sort of segues into like the big thing coming back to the podcast this week is football's back.
Yeah.
So preseason's been going on for a few weeks now. It's interesting because I always find preseason to sort of be like Taco Bell. It's like if you haven't eaten Taco Bell in 6 months and then you drive by and you're hungry, you're like, oh, dude, Taco Bell. And then you go and you eat it and you're like, man, I don't know if I was into this that much. And it's the same with preseason. Like, you're like, football's back. And then you turn it on, you're like, dude, it ain't back yet.
Yeah, after that first quarter, or maybe even like the first half of the first quarter, and you're just like, man, who are these guys playing?
Yeah.
I don't even know.
It's like, I get it. It is good to watch guys if you're wanting to see like who's going to make a roster move, like who's just making a roster at the end of the day for the 53-man. But half of your starters aren't playing half the time.
Well, it's difficult with the way the media makes it look too. Is like there's like one group of people who go, the preseason matters. Like, they're who's playing, all this different stuff. They make like this big deal out of it. And there's another side who are just like, preseason doesn't matter at all. None of the starters playing. And somehow I feel like they're both completely wrong. Like in some situations for some teams who do have like actual position battles or guys trying to make rosters, it kind of matters. But for other teams, guys who we know are solidified starters or, guys that they're not going to play to not get hurt, it doesn't matter. So any given game, it could or could not matter, but they try to make it, all matter or all not matter all at the same time, and it's difficult.
I mean, transitioning from Aaron Jones as you look at Jordan Love, and it's like I literally saw on ESPN this morning, they're like, are they even going to miss Aaron Rodgers? And I want to be like, Yes.
Let's get real here.
Yeah. If Aaron Rodgers couldn't make that offense work last year, the likelihood that Jordan Love steps in and they're winning the division is super low. And I hate seeing this about the Bears just because I think the Bears catch a lot of grief. I felt bad because this is sort of that preseason hype that you talk about. Like DJ Moore, great player. I love the addition of him to the Bears, but him catching that first pass and taking it for a touchdown, I'm just like, man, this is really giving Bears fans false hope real quick because they sit back and they watch this and they're like, this is what it's going to be like all year.
Yeah.
And it's like, we'll see.
So perfect example. I can't remember if it was like 3-4 years ago, maybe the Browns, right? They had Baker. They had that defense. Like everybody's like, this year is going to be the Browns' year. And they come out in the first preseason game, and then the Redskins, I think they were playing, and they just mopped the floor with them. Like they came out, they looked fast, they looked quick, and everybody was like, "Oh snap! Like
Baker's the real deal."
Yeah, like maybe this is gonna happen.
We got it.
The real season started, and Browns did Browns things, and I think they had a shot at making the playoffs, but they
did. They do exactly what you said. The Browns find ways to lose games that they have no business losing, and then they still can't win the games that truly matter at the end of the day, and they're always like 6-10, and it sucks. But going into this episode, we're talking about the NFC, starting with the Super Bowl runner-up, and personally, who I think is the best team in all of football this year, which is the Eagles.
I agree.
And for me, it starts off with the fact that when you take a look at that team, I would argue that they were the only team that significantly got better for being a top-tier team.
Yeah.
Like, you look at the draft, and we've got to see him in a few preseason games, which I get. There's a lot of preseason hype. But in terms of him just beating guys one-on-one, dude, Jalen Carter is a monster. And if he plays that way during the season, dude, they may win every game.
I mean, we all thought he was going to be that guy coming out of Georgia. It was just right there towards the end when all of a sudden he started getting kind of sloppy. He had some off-field things going on.
Gained a little weight.
Yeah, that's why his draft capital dropped, right? Remember that? Like,
I remember.
He was supposed to be the number one pick. Like, it was guaranteed going to happen. And all of a sudden, it was just like a few little things, and all of a sudden, it was like, oh, he slid. Excuse me. And I think, that was like the best thing for him and the Eagles, right? One, because that allowed him to slide to the Eagles. But two, I think that maybe woke him up of like, this isn't handed to me.
This is a business.
Yeah, like I got to actually come out and perform. And he, stepped up to the skill set that he's always had. And he's, should have been that number one draft pick.
And for the rest of the NFL, it's dangerous because you look at that defensive line, and the only one that like rivals it on paper is the Commanders. Now, that's the thing about the Commander. Every single year, you look at that defense, and you're like,
on paper, they should be really good.
Really good. I mean, they should literally be sacking quarterbacks like 8 times a game, and then during the game, it just doesn't happen.
Yeah.
The Eagles, on the other hand, actually did that last year outside of the Super Bowl. Like, when you watch them week in, week out, like I think they set the record, beat the 85 Bears for number of sacks in a season. That they had multiple guys that had more than 10 sacks each. Like, they were dominant. And the fact that then you give them Jalen Carter, and then they go get another first-round pick in Nolan from Georgia as well. I mean, it's Georgia's defense built all over.
Which, that's a heck of a defense, dude. Like
they ran college football for the past 2 years, so you can't sit back and argue with the statistics of it.
So they did lose a few starters on the defensive side, but again, when you're talking about like they were already Super Bowl runner-up, I feel like they just got better, and it's difficult. I agree with you though. I think they're the most complete team, offensive and defensive sides of the ball in the NFL.
I haven't finished in first in the division. My only question for the Eagles is what's the running game look like? I know they got DeAndre Swift. I personally think he's an upgrade over Miles Sanders if he can stay healthy. The issue is it's one of those ones that you don't know what you got until he goes into the offense and starts running. Ultimately, Jalen Hurts runs everything. So
that would be my one. I think Swift is going to be fine in that offense simply because they have so many other weapons. Like they don't have to rely on Swift to like carry that load.
But after them, it's one of those. Same with Kansas City. It was like, hey, we got Kansas City number one, same as the Eagles, and then it's sort of like where do you guys finish? I do think that the Cowboys are the second best team in the division, as much as I don't like saying that. They'll find ways to lose in the divisional game, the divisional round, the playoffs.
We'll get to that.
We'll get to that in a minute. But I take a look at the Cowboys. I personally think that, their big offseason move was getting rid of Zeke, which I love.
Same, dude. I'm shocked that Jerry Jones finally pulled that plug because he doesn't like to admit that he's wrong or that he made mistakes, and he was putting it all in on Zeke. And I think
for the past 2 years, you couldn't watch a Cowboys game and see Pollard run and see Zeke run and not be like
pretend that Pollard wasn't the clear better back.
Yeah, 100%.
So I think it helps open up Pollard. I agree with you. I got the Cowboys number 2, just simply because they got a great defense who can take away the ball, which they're going to need to since Dak gives away the ball every other play.
Speaking of that, it was so funny where someone sent out a clip. And it was like, Dak's already in midseason form in practice, and he just throws that
lobbing up
interception. And then he had the boldness to come out and be like, I'm going to throw less than 10 interceptions this year. You were immediately like, let's go ahead and double that. It's going to be 20 for sure. After the Cowboys, for me, it's the Giants. It's one of those ones I know we talked beforehand that the Giants season really comes down to Saquon. Him coming back for them. If Saquon hadn't come back, I actually would put the Giants dead last.
So when we made this list, I had the Giants as 4, but that's because Saquon I wasn't sure was going to play. And I know they've put all this money into Daniel Jones like he's their guy, which is fine. I don't have a problem with Daniel Jones, but like he's not going to be the guy to win you games. Like that offense and that team is based upon how Barkley plays. Barkley's rookie year, he came out and he was phenomenal, and the Giants did great. Second year comes out, he's not that good. He gets injured. The Giants are terrible. Third year comes out, Barkley has kind of a resurgence last year. Now they've got Daniel Jones to help out with that, but like it ran through Barkley. And if Barkley doesn't sign with the Giants, dude, I have them 4th. But because, now that they've signed, I've switched it. I've got the Giants 3rd and then the Commanders 4th.
The issue with the Daniel Jones thing is it's not going to affect them this year. It's going to keep affecting them in the following years. When you have a quarterback that comes off a rookie deal and then you pay him that type of money, it hurts other positions. And the Giants are in that position right now where it's like the Giants aren't a complete team. It's not like paying Patrick Mahomes where you have this tremendous team built around him that it's like, and it's also Patrick Mahomes that last year, I mean, if you had told me, hey, the Chiefs are going to win the Super Bowl without Tyreek Hill, I'd been like, no way. And then they come out and they look even more dominant. Daniel Jones is not that guy that it's like, hey, we're going to take pay cuts. You're going to deal with like some second, third tier wide receivers. You need to make it work. That's not who Daniel Jones is. So, yeah, I got him finishing 3rd. It's one of those ones, they'll beat some teams that they probably don't have the business in beating, but at the same time, they're not consistent with beating the better teams in the NFC all the time.
Yeah, they're still missing a few pieces, both offensive and defensively, to really put them over that tier.
100%. And then finally, you have the Commanders, which this is what I'll say about the Commanders. I'm not trying to take a huge dump on the Commanders. They finally got rid of the biggest dump in that organization, which was Snyder.
Yeah.
So, I mean, talk about a dude that literally – good. I hope we never hear his name again. I mean, his whole tenure as an owner could be summed up with that disrespect of that Sean Taylor memorial that they put up with the wire mesh. Like, I couldn't think of anything better that represents that organization than in terms of how bad Snyder was than that memorial, because that memorial should have been like the best thing in the NFL.
I'm surprised they didn't like burn it down when it got revealed, because it's just the absolute disrespect. It reminded me of like that 6th grader who had like a science project due that he's known about for like months, and it's like the night prior, and he's like, "Hey mom, I got a science project due." So they just like throw together some salt and water or something. And
I literally can't think of a better analogy than that when it comes to that Sean Taylor.
It was awful. Like they need to redo that immediately.
Yeah. So hopefully they get that done. But you take a look at the Commanders. I think that they do. It's sad because they have really good talent on both sides of the ball. Like if you put Scary Terry on half of the teams in the NFL, I think that they talk about him as the best wide receiver in all of football.
Yeah, he's a top 10 receiver, easy, maybe even top 5.
He just never had anyone to throw it to him. So, I mean, Sam Howell, I hate saying this. It's not even giving this guy a chance, but he is literally the second coming of Trubisky. I mean, same university, of UNC. But I sit back and I'm like, it's this guy again. Like, you talked about it. Jacoby Brissett's just sitting there, and I'll be shocked if he's not filling in.
I mean, but like by week 4, I give it like 3 weeks. And again, it's nothing against Sam Howell. He's not the guy. Like, they've got him all hyped up in preseason when he's playing against the number 2s, on the other squad. Like,
For sure.
He's going to get revealed. I guarantee it. Like, I'm surprised, and I think I've already said this, like, that they named him the starter so early. Like, if anything, I would have made it like this. Oh, we're still doing a quarterback battle. Even if they knew in their heart of hearts they were going to make Sam Howell the week 1 starter, but just to name him the starter so early was surprising to me. I don't know if it's maybe to like give him a little confidence.
That's what I think. It's a confidence boost thing to just say, hey, you're the starter, get some feet under you, which I get. Is he an upgrade over Wentz? I don't want to argue. Yeah, like,
but I mean, when you bring in someone like Jacoby Brissett, like that's the purpose I feel like of bringing in someone like that, someone who's been around the league, is decently skilled as a veteran. Like, let Howell kind of learn from him a little bit. Like, you don't bring in Brissett to sit behind someone who's not going to be your franchise quarterback. And if they think Sam Howell's going to be their franchise quarterback, well, then they're a worse organization than I thought.
I'm not going to argue.
So,
that point.
I mean, unless I don't know what their end game is. Like, if they're thinking this is just like a rebuilding year, maybe, or if they're just using it to like get Sam Howell experience, fine, maybe. But if they actually want to compete and actually like try to get to the playoffs, 3-4 weeks tops, and they're bringing in Brissett.
I mean, the sad thing is that the Commanders really want to compete for the playoffs and need to lose every game this year and get
Caleb Williams. Hey,
I mean,
let's suck for luck.
It's true because eventually you do have to finish in the top of the draft. Now it takes one of those years that you have to get in line of a generational quarterback that's coming out, which I would argue that Caleb Williams is that. Like, he is going to be that guy that wherever he goes, he's going to get a great chance at being good. It really just depends on the organization that he goes to.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, talking about it, that's sort of our next conference is the NFC West.
All right. So when we initially came up with this idea, and it was like, all right, we're going to rank all these teams, who we think is going to be first and last, all that. It was easy of going like, all right, Chiefs are number 1, maybe number 2. Eagles are number 1, maybe number 2. And then from there, it was like, dead last, it's the Arizona Cardinals.
For sure.
Like, it was easy. I'll fill in the middle of the rest, but it was like Eagles, Chiefs, and then last is the Arizona Cardinals.
They are
dumpster fire.
Oh, that video that came out of them throwing, it was like, they're practicing against themselves. Someone doesn't even get blocked. Quarterback should have been sacked. He throws it up and just hits the corner in the back of the head. And you're just like, oh my gosh, like they are on a train to 0-16, which I mean, I will say, you look at their schedule and I'm like, I don't really know how many games they're going to win this year because it could easily be like a 3-14
If
year.
they knew any better, they would win 0.
Oh, 100%.
Because they have the opportunity to go out and get Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison Jr. in the same draft.
Oh, if the Texans finish as bad as people think they are, they hold the Texans pick. So if they go 1-2, if they don't go Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison Jr., burn the organization to the ground if you live in Arizona. Just start over, move them back to St. Louis. St. Louis would love a football team again. Maybe a little too soon still after the Rams left and then won a Super Bowl. But I will say I've been to I know that's a little bit of a side note. I went to St. Louis and watched the game in that stadium. It is a bad stadium. I can see how the Rams were like, hey, we need a new stadium. This one's been around for...
SoFi's pretty dope.
SoFi's amazing. I've flown over it a few times, and you sit back and you're just like, God bless. So, yeah, I mean, we're
agreed that the Cardinals are last.
Dead last.
Let's start at the top. Who you got number 1?
I still think San Francisco. And I get that the big question mark's Purdy. If he's out, based upon the first few weeks of preseason, San Francisco is not the number 1 team in the division because Trey Lance looks abysmal.
Well, even if Purdy's out, I don't know if Trey Lance is the guy. I think they go with Darnold. Everything I've been hearing out of camp, Darnold looks great.
Yeah, in preseason he has struggled a little. I think he throws a better ball than Trey Lance. It's just a matter of can Darnold stopped seeing ghosts. Like the New York messed that man up. Like I hate to say it, like he got the roughest start with going to New York and was just getting abused up there, like every other quarterback that they've drafted in the past since Namath. But for me, I think that people forget that last year to open up the season, people just sort of thought it was a fluke. And I really sit back and go, no, this was real life for the 49ers. The Bears beat the snot out of the 49ers. And a lot of people were like, oh, it was the rain. There were all these other factors. And it's like, no, I really don't think Trey Lance is the guy.
Oh, no, he's definitely not the guy.
And he ended up getting hurt. They throw in Jimmy G. Jimmy G plays pretty good. He gets hurt. Purdy comes in, and Purdy looks amazing. If that same Purdy shows up, like if you put the 49ers and the Eagles on a neutral field and say play 10 times, I think that it's an even split.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to take away. Like, I think the Niners are amazing and, like, could be over a span of history, like, could look like one of the most complete teams in NFL history. But it's sad to say that they're not even the number one this year because that's how good I think the Eagles are.
100%.
But, yeah, I got the Niners on top, too. I mean, speaking of Trey Lance, like, Kyle Shanahan is a fantastic coach.
Yes.
His system can make mediocre quarterbacks look good. And I'm not taking anything away from Brock Purdy because I think Brock Purdy has well outkicked his coverage as far as draft capital and all that stuff. But I wouldn't say that he's like a superstar that has all the intangibles and all that stuff. However, because he's in Shanahan's system and he has that solid team built around him with so many weapons, they're going to still be dangerous.
Well, he's one of those coaches that we talk about that when you found a true NFL coach that when he shows up to an organization, he doesn't gain a lot of extra players, but the team immediately gets better.
His specialty becomes immediately, that much better.
Yeah, the offense in San Francisco is amazing.
And this, again, it just goes back to like why Trey Lance is not the guy. Like, if you have Ayuk, Debo, Kittle, McCaffrey, and one of the best defenses on the other side, and you still don't look good as a quarterback, dog, it's you.
Yeah, it's you.
It's you.
But, I mean, the thing about San Francisco and my number 2 team is Seattle, it's both of those teams when they play one another, like that is always a great game.
Yeah.
Like I don't care how the teams are doing.
The NFC West is like that. Those NFC West divisional games are always fun to watch because they always turn out to be good games.
Yeah, even when the Cardinals play someone, I will give it to the Cardinals. They'll play those teams tougher, and it's just they play them so often that they get used to it. I mean, Seattle, the biggest thing that my question is can Geno
repeat? Yeah, we'll see. I hope he does because
I'm not doubting him. I think he has enough experience in the NFL at this point in his career that it's clear that Seattle made the good choice with the trade. Like they know exactly what they want in a quarterback, and Geno is that.
Yeah, and they got it. Yeah,
it's just a matter can they continue to put the pieces together. I think that now this is a little fantasy, and we'll talk about that here later. Smith and Jigba, I think, is going to do great in that offense. I don't think he's going to put out the numbers that people think because
he'll be the number 3 receiver.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's tough to get the volume to really shine that way.
You got to pull it away from Metcalf and Lockett.
Yeah.
But when you take a look at like from a football standpoint, what he brings to that team, like when you have Metcalf, Smith and Jigba, and Lockett all on the field at the same time, and Kenneth Walker in the backfield, that's a really good football team. And that's why I say it comes down to Geno to be able to disperse the football correctly and not turn it over and give those guys the chance. But offensively, they should be really good. Like if you told me that Seattle won the division, I wouldn't be shocked. Like it's not outside of my mind to know that
I wouldn't be shocked, but I would respond with like, well, what happened to the Niners? Like who broke their foot or whose arm got dislocated because
Kyle Shanahan died. In the middle of the year.
Like because I mean, don't get me wrong, I think the Seahawks are the clear number 2, but I don't think they're competing for that division truly against the Niners.
Yeah, it's just one of those ones that if they were to win, I don't think that you would be as blown away as like say the Commanders winning the NFC.
Sure,
it's not something out of realistic expectations. And then finally, the third team we're both on the same page then is the Rams. I think the Rams, this is just a product. Cheers to the Rams. Like I got to give them a toast. You literally sold out did everything with your capital, everything to win a Super Bowl, and you did it.
Went all in, and it paid off.
It paid off.
Yeah.
And now you're just paying the consequences of it, which teams may sit back and be like, see what happens? And I'm like, the Browns, all these, the Jets, Vikings, Texans, Titans.
How many Super Bowls you have in the last year?
Exactly.
Yeah.
If you told me, hey, you can sell out for the next 10 years to get one Super Bowl, sell it out.
Do it.
Like, I'll do anything possible to get that one Super Bowl. Do it. They did it. Now they're just playing, they're paying the price for it. Because ultimately, I think that Stafford's getting up in age. I wouldn't be shocked if this is his last year.
I thought he was going to retire at the end of last season.
I thought he was going to retire at the end of the Super Bowl. Like, just be like, hey,
yeah,
I know where this team's trajectory
Got one.
is.
See ya.
See ya.
Yeah.
The thing I can see happening from the Rams is I do think they start divesting to get some of that capital back in stock, draft stock. I would not be shocked to see a championship contender team go get Aaron Donald. Like, ultimately, I don't think the Rams are going to be competing at any point for the playoffs. And the second that really becomes known in the season, I wouldn't be shocked to see some of their better players get picked off and go to other. It already happened with Ramsey to the Dolphins.
And say what? Like, you're thinking they start just like taking draft capital from other teams?
Yeah.
That's fair.
I can, just because Donald's on the end of his career, why not get something for him now than not see anything and
then
just
wait
write up the
until
rest
he's definitely gone, and now you're not getting the kind of picks you want for
exactly.
a future Hall of Famer.
I just don't. That's what I see happening this year to the Rams.
Yeah.
It'll just be interesting. Next division up is the NFC South, which I'm going to be dead honest. I had this division looking different before the preseason.
Yeah.
I had the Panthers number one.
I did not.
Yeah, I know you did. You had the team that I'm now saying is number one. This is my thought with the Panthers. I really thought that, hey, young team, but could rally around Bryce Young. They have good talent. I just think that they have the pieces there that they could be good. But then the first 2 weeks of the preseason, I'm like, Bryce Young's going to die on the field. Like, he's already small, and my man is scrambling for his life against these teams, which I get. First week was the Jets, but then the second week was not the Jets, and he still, by the Giants, was getting just running.
I just look at it from like a historical standpoint. Like, when has a quarterback been drafted, in the top 1, 2, 3 that's come into a not very good organization or team from the previous year, and then like all of a sudden came out and won the division? Like,
100%.
How many times has that happened in history?
The only team that I know of that I can remember that the quarterback came in, now it was still a good team, was Big Ben with the Steelers. His rookie year. But the
Panthers are not the old Steelers.
No,
yeah.
They're not even the Steelers of today. I'd still say the Steelers of today are better put together, especially in terms of organization, than the Panthers are.
Yeah, because they didn't get – I mean, Big Ben was late in the first round, wasn't he?
Yeah. Yes. He was not looked at as the quarterback. I mean, he was coming out of Miami, Ohio. So you sit back and he wasn't getting these like amazing.
Yeah, he wasn't like the number 1, number 2 draft pick. And that's kind of what my point is like the reason those teams are getting the number 1, number 2 draft pick is because they sucked the previous year, right? Like, so it's very, very difficult. And this is nothing against Bryce Young. I think could have a fine season if they're able to build a team around him. Not a fine season, a fine career if they build a team around him and he can, grow into that role. But for him to ask him to come out year 1 and just like win the division. Now, if there's a division to do it, it's the NFC South because right, like look at the rest of his competition. They could be sub 500 and still win the division, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Well, let's be honest. The only team that Carolina's competing against, who I now have winning the division, is the Saints.
Yeah,
Carr is going to come in. I think that he'll do fine. I think it will be the same. We sort of talked about this, when you sit back and you go, oh, well, they got David Carr. It's the same with the flip-flop of the Raiders and Jimmy G. Like, it doesn't matter. They are the same player.
Trading Derek Carr to get Jimmy G is the equivalent of trading Jimmy G to get Derek Carr.
100%. So I sit back and the thing about Carr that like makes me nervous, and I think that's the reason I was looking at the Panthers, is like you look back at his last season with the Raiders, like you got Josh Jacobs, who was just a freak last year in terms of running the football, Devontae Adams, Waller, and Hunter Renfrow, and it wasn't as good as you would have liked to have seen out of Carr, which I get. He's playing in the AFC West, a stacked
that's
division.
Yeah, that was going to be my counter to that.
This
Plus,
is-
their defense isn't very good.
Yes,
They have good players, but as a team defense, they get scored on a lot.
100%. This is his. There's two quarterbacks in the NFC South for me that it's make or break years, and Carr is one of them.
Baker.
And Baker's the other. For me, I think the Saints just have more positions filled. Their defense has always been good. Cameron Jordan's amazing. He's a Hall of Famer in my book. They will win the games that I think they're supposed to in the NFC South. Now, how they compete in the NFC is a little bit different of a story. But in terms of the division, I got the Saints finishing number one.
Yeah, and it's just from an experience standpoint because you got the Panthers with Bryce Young, the Bucks. Yeah, Baker's experienced, but that's just because he's getting passed around teams. He's not gonna go out there and win. And I think the Bucks are probably one of the worst teams in the NFL right now.
100%. I mean, for me, I personally think the Bucks are going to be dead last in the division, and that's because I don't like anything about their offensive line. Everyone dogs on Brady, and I get statistically, did Brady have a bad year last year? 100%. But you cannot sit back and be like, hey, you didn't have your starting center. You lost your guard in free agency. You lost tackles every other week, and then expect Brady to still just, hey, Brady throws the football.
Yeah.
You can't block at the same time.
Yeah.
Like he's a 45-year-old man, or 46 last year, running for his life. Like,
just don't end up with a walker.
I mean, Brady's draft film showed that he wasn't a runner. Combat, he's still dead last in every category in the combine. But
and then the Falcons, they've got Desmond Ridder again.
Who?
He's not a rookie, but again, I'm talking about inexperience. Like the Saints are the only team that have like multiple experience around all positions that are. And again, because of they're all in the same division, they're just the clear favorite there.
So you got the Saints number one. Do you have Carolina number two?
I do have the Panthers number two.
And then who's your number three?
So when I wrote this originally, I had the Bucks 3 and the Falcons 4. I think the Falcons are going to be number 3 just because I think they're going to switch out at quarterback. I don't necessarily think Desmond Ridder's going to be the guy. They've got Taylor Heineke, who's a pretty good backup. Like he comes in and he does some things, but Bijan's hard to ignore. Anytime a running back gets drafted that high in the NFL draft, they usually have a pretty good rookie season because that team kind of revolves around them. And I think Bijan catapults them above the Bucks, who I just think are weak everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, the Falcons have a lot of pieces. Like they have Drake London, they have Kyle Pitts, they have Bijan. Their question comes down to Ridder, which I think Ridder is just one of those guys that if Cincinnati hadn't have went to the college football playoff, I don't think Ridder's talked about as highly as he is.
Probably.
And when you sort of watch him throughout the year, he's not one of those guys that you watch and you're like, dude, this guy's got like an NFL arm talent. And I think that's even for fans to sort of recognize that you watch him play and you're just like, man, anytime fans are like, yo, I don't think this is our guy. Because when Patrick Mahomes got on the field, guess what? Everyone was like, well, we found our guy.
Yeah.
We found our guy. Like there was not a question of, is this our guy? And anytime the owner has to come out and be like, he's our guy, like you never see Kansas City or the Jets right now being out and be like, he's our guy.
They don't need to because it's clear. Yeah,
it's clear.
The owners are trying to reaffirm it to make their decision.
Trying to sell some tickets this year. Like, hey, please come watch us. So, I mean, we both have the divisions finished in the same way. Saints, Panthers, Falcons, Bucks. Ultimately, like I said, make or break year for Mayfield for me with the Bucks coming in dead last. I think it's the most talent he's had on offense. All the older guys, like
Godwin needs to stay healthy. Mike Evans is always going to be a threat, but he is getting up there in age. Now he can get away with it, but he needs Baker to be able to throw him the ball.
Yeah.
And I think they're weak at running back. Rashad White is okay, but I think he's better like as an change of pace back kind of guy. I don't think he's going to be able to like handle a full load and really become a threat that helps out the passing game.
Which, I mean, the news broke this morning that they're giving Jonathan Taylor permission to go seek a trade. Like, this is the fit for him. In terms of money, they need a running back. I wouldn't be shocked to see Tampa Bay make a move towards them.
There's a couple teams that could use Jonathan.
100%. We'll get to one of those here in a minute because it's out of the NFC, which I know you want him to go to because it makes the most sense, especially with the cap and everything. We'll get to that here in a minute, which actually is right now because it's the NFC North. So because you think that Taylor going to the Bears makes a lot of sense.
I think it makes the most sense. There might be places that are better fit for Taylor, but from a draft capital standpoint of like, or not draft capital, but like a salary cap, like the Bears have a lot of salary cap to play with. And again, people go, oh, we got Khalil Herbert. Again, not the guy that's going to handle the full load. He's a great third down back. He's a great pass catching back, but he's not going to be the guy that can just pound the rock to help open up your passing game. And I mean, if you put Jonathan Taylor and Justin Fields in the backfield together, that's hard to stop.
Yeah.
And then they went and added DJ Moore so that Fields can throw the ball down the field. I mean, I think it's a great spot for him. There's other teams that could benefit from Jonathan Taylor, like the Bucks, maybe I don't know. I can't think of another one off. The Bills. I think the Bills could probably benefit from Jonathan Taylor, but I just think personally, from a team who's kind of up and coming, if Jonathan Taylor still wanted to like have a shot at winning something, I think the Bears are the best fit for him.
The Bears have a lot of potential this year, and I think this is sort of the NFC North to me is that division that I personally think the bottom team's the Packers. I don't think Jordan Love is going to have this amazing year, and I'm not saying that condemn the guy immediately that he's not going to make it as a quarterback. I just think that it's always hard to follow up a generational quarterback for your team. And rarely do teams go like the Packers did with going far to Rodgers.
Yeah.
I mean, you have Montana to Young, but this is the thing. I have never in the NFL has it went 1, 2, 3.
No, never.
So historically, it says Love's not going to be the guy. We'll see how it shakes out. I don't have the respect for the Packers. LaFleur, to me, is not a good coach. And what I mean by that is it's not that he's a bad coach. He's just one of those guys that when he came in to replace McCarthy, there was no change in the team. Like it was the exact same team.
Wasn't really big shoes to fill either.
Well, I mean, it was big shoes, but not in terms of, actual accomplishments, which I get. He won the Super Bowl. McCarthy did. I would argue that was completely different. It wasn't McCarthy. It was Rodgers and they had Driver, Jennings. Like they had a lot of guys.
Great defense.
Yeah. Clay Matthews was playing out of his mind.
Yeah.
It was just a completely different team. For me, it is such a struggle picking this number one team for me because it's the Vikings, in my opinion. I think everyone in the NFL would love to see the Lions.
You got the Vikings number one.
I got the Vikings number one.
Wow.
It is because their offense, I think, on paper, is the best in the division. Now, that's saying something with Kirk. Kirk's a good quarterback. Like, Kirk would be a starter in half the league. The issue is when it comes to Kirk's biggest flaw is primetime games. Like, when you sit back and you put him in a position where it's like, hey, we got to have you win this game, more times than not, Kirk doesn't do it.
Listen, I don't disagree with you. You're right. Like the Vikings offensively are solid. They're tough to compete with offensively. But they had basically the same offense last year that they do this year. They lost Cook, but again, I don't think Madison is that big of a knockoff from Cook. And they've added Jordan Addison, which
I love Addison.
Yeah, me too. But I agree that helps. However, again, I would say, apples to apples, the offense is relatively similar than it was last year. And I know they won the division last year, but their defense is terrible. They let up so many points. And from a historical standpoint, they won. The reason they won the division is because they had like 8 games or something like that were within one score. And they just happened to win all 8 of them. That's just not going to happen again this year. You know what I mean? Like, if they get into those one-score games, they're just not going to win all 8 again. It's not going to happen.
The NFC North will be decided by whoever's defense plays best. Because I think when you look at the Vikings, Lions, and Bears, they all have good offenses. Like, they can each outscore the other. It's just about whose defense plays best. Now, and that's where, for me, it's not – the Lions, to me, I want to see them win the division. Their secondary last year was just awful. Like, they couldn't stop anybody.
See, I've got the Lions, and this, I know it's going to be crazy to say, the Lions to me are kind of like how I feel like the Chiefs have been kind of over the last year. Their offense is just filthy. I mean, like, hard to stop. Goff is coming into it, and he's got great weapons. Adding Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery, I think that's going to be an absolute monster two-headed running back system back there. But their defense is always suspect. I think the Chiefs,
and they got guys that they went out. They got a middle linebacker. They got Jahmyr Gibbs. They got Sam Laporta for tight end. Like, they added guys that you sit back and you're like, hey, I think that they have the pieces there.
That's why I compare them to the Chiefs. Like, the Chiefs aren't overrated or underrated on a defense. They're just kind of like, can you just keep us from losing?
Yes,
100%. But I think as long as they can do that, the offense for the Lions is going to win them games. I've got the Lions winning the division.
And so you've got the Lions, I've got the Vikes, and are we flipped on that? Do you have the Vikes number 2, or
So I do have the Vikings number 2. However, I want to put on the record that I would not be surprised if they finish like in a tie with the Bears for second, or like they actually finish third and the Bears finish second. I could see them both like a game above 500 or maybe 2 games above 500, and it's just going to come down to like the head-to-head between them for who finishes second and third.
I mean, the Bears, they went out, they did exactly what they needed to. They got an offensive tackle in the draft from Tennessee who was it was a great story on Twitter a few weeks ago. My man went out, he had the wrong testing. So I don't know if people know this, when you show up back in the summer, you have to take a conditioning test to prove that, like, hey, you're ready to go. And it's not only just for, hey, we're playing football here, but it's also like from a medical standpoint to make sure, like, hey, if you come
it's like
out,
a physical.
Yeah, we need to make sure. Their rookie offensive lineman was practicing for the wide receiver. Like, he didn't know that he was looking at the wrong sheet, and they were like, my man didn't even like sweat when he did the offensive lineman, and they were like talking about it. They're like, yeah, he was in amazing shape, which I'm like, bless his heart. Like, he's out there like full sprint, like, dude, I don't know if I'm gonna make it. Like, I'm out here testing wide receiver stuff, and then you show up to camp and you're like, man, this was really easy. Like, so good on him. They got him. They get some defensive linemen, which they need help with, especially after they lost Khalil Mack. It's one of those ones where the Bears have a lot of potential.
Yeah.
And if they were to finish number 2 in the division, I wouldn't be shocked. Finishing number 1, in my opinion, is a little lofty for the Bears.
I agree.
But I can see them definitely beating the Vikings. Like, if Vikings go to Soldier Field, I would not be shocked to see the Bears pull it out.
Yeah.
Like,
and I think it's just, it's not a make or break season for Justin Fields, but I do think, like, seeing kind of what he was able to finally start putting together at the end of last season, I think he's just going to keep getting more and more experience. Now they've added a few weapons. This is why I think they need to go get Jonathan Taylor, because having that extra weapon to take the running burden off of Fields.
So you're just not big on Herbert?
It's not that I'm not big on Herbert. If you want to be competitive and win divisions, you need, a good running game to help out the passing game. And I just don't think Khalil Herbert is like the huge threat for other teams. And that's going to make Justin Fields take the burden of running the ball, which
for sure.
They don't want him to do, because that, outside of like a few guys, it usually ends up bad for the quarterback. So I think they need a more prolific guy that they can hand the ball to 20-something times a game and not worry about it.
Taylor would for sure be an upgrade over Herbert, and that's not really a shot at Herbert. That's more talking about just the potential of Taylor. It's undeniable that he is one of the best backs in the league when he's healthy, so it's just a matter of what happens with him. So I've got the Vikings, you've got the Lions, number 1, and then we both flipped on the number 2. We got them finishing 1 and 2 respectively, and then we got Bears and you had the Packers last. So ultimately that's sort of how the NFC picture looking at. And then, for us, it's now taking a look at how do you think the playoffs are going to go. So what's your divisional winners for the NFC looking like?
So my divisional winners are, and in order from the record, Eagles are going to be number 1 out of the NFC West. The East there. They're going to get the bye. Niners are number 2. I think the Saints take the South, and then the Lions are going to take the North.
So you get Saints at 3 and
Saints at 3,
Lions at 4.
at 4. Not because I think the Saints are a better team than the Lions. I just think they're in a far easier division, so they're going to have more wins over the course of the year and take number 3 spot.
I get that. So who do you have in the wild card?
So I got the Cowboys as the number 5, the Vikings as number 6, and then the Seahawks number 7.
And so what's those matchups looking like for you?
So Niners are going to play the Seahawks. The Niners are going to win. Saints are going to play the Vikings. I think the Saints are going to win. They're going to get their revenge from the Minnesota Miracle there. The Lions are going to play the Cowboys, and I think the Lions are going to win. Cowboys are going to find a way to cowboy it up, and the Lions are going to take it.
Wow. So you got the Cowboys going out in the wild card. For me, I've got, same with you, Eagles 1, Niners 2, but then I got Vikings 3 and Saints 4, and it's more just about, I think that the Saints lose a few more games throughout the course of the year than the Vikings do, and it sort of edges the Vikings up a little bit. It's not speaking to them being a better team. It's just...
Who are they going to lose to? Look at their schedule, dude.
I get the Saints have...
They play like 3 teams that are even remotely tough. Their schedule is like Georgia's schedule this year. It's cupcake.
I always say that, but until David Carr proves to me, or Derek Carr proves to me that it's the same thing, in my opinion, they're identical. Until he proves he can consistently beat the teams that he should win, that's where like my biggest heartburn comes from with the Saints. So I've got Vikings 3, Saints 4, and then my wild card, I've got the the Lions at 5. I've got the Cowboys at 6, and
Interesting.
At 7, I have Seattle.
Okay, so pretty similar.
So I've got the 49ers playing the Lions, of which the 49ers win. I've got the Vikings playing the Cowboys, of which the Cowboys win. And then I've got the Saints playing Seattle, which I've got Seattle winning, which would make my,
I can see that. Yeah.
divisional round being the Eagles versus Seattle and the 49ers versus the Cowboys for the 3rd straight year of them lining up. So what is your divisional?
I've got the Eagles facing the Lions.
Okay.
Eagles are going to take it. And then the Niners playing the Saints, and that's going to be a blowout.
Of
the Niners.
Yeah. Okay. I had to just say it on the podcast. That way people know.
Let's not get carried away here.
Yeah, we're not that dumb. For me, Eagles, Seattle, I've got the Eagles beating Seattle. It's just too much for the Eagles. The 49ers versus the Cowboys. For me, I don't know what that shade of red is for the 49ers, but I like to think of it as that Marlboro Red, just straight cowboy killer.
Cowboy killers.
Because that's all they do. Like every time the 49ers meet the Cowboys, they find a way to win, and Dallas always finds the best way for Cowboys to lose, like period. Like 2 years
Zeke
ago.
getting pancaked.
Oh, my God. Which, I mean, Zeke's been eating some pancakes if you ain't seen
Good
that.
grief, dude.
My man's put on someone
Looks like
needs
an
to stop
old
feeding Zeke.
lineman.
But, I mean, they run that horrific play that just gets Zeke murdered after he gets pancaked, and then they toss it to him, gets murdered again, like twice in one play, sums up his Dallas career. And then the year before is when Dak Prescott takes off running. And
no
the
timeouts.
Yeah.
Let's run down the middle of the field and slide.
You just got McCarthy out there just with that mouth open,
breathing.
just like,
Yeah.
oh, what happened?
I didn't call that play.
Yeah. Well, this is what happens when Jerry Jones has been making the picks and calling plays from the booth for the past 25 years. You've been without a Super Bowl, and that's going to continue this year because the Cowboys are going to lose again in the divisional round. So you can always go ahead and make the GIF now. The
Cowboys are eliminated.
Yeah, from Super Bowl contention. Which for me, it brings us to Eagles-Niners.
Eagles-Niners.
For the NFC. And it is such a hard place to be in to not make that the NFC call. Because I don't see other teams playing one another.
They're number 1 and number 2 as far as most complete teams in the NFL. I know the Chiefs are just amazing and they won the Super Bowl and everybody loves them, but from a complete full team standpoint,
especially defense.
Yeah, they're number 3. Like if that. The Eagles and Niners are 1 and 2 easy.
It speaks to Mahomes' greatness of how good he is as a quarterback in order to get there, but in terms of where their defense is, they're not comparable to the Eagles and Niners, which I've got the Eagles beating the Niners, and they're going to the Super Bowl for the 2nd straight year. What do you got?
So, again, originally when I wrote this, I put the Eagles winning, but I'm switching my pick, and I think the Niners are going to pull it out because of like what we talked about. You put them on the field 10 times, and it probably goes 50-50.
That's
so
shocking.
I think because look at it. As good as the Eagles were last year, if Brock Purdy doesn't get hurt in that game, I don't know. I think the Niners could have taken it.
It's such a tough
It's
call.
a toss-up. It really is a
toss-up.
toss-up. I'm just going to play the other side and take the Niners.
If somehow San Francisco was able to finish number 1 in the NFC and host the Eagles, I see it more.
That's a great point.
But going to Philly, now last year they were at Philly last year, and still, like you said, if Purdy doesn't get hurt, I think everyone sort of sits back and they're like, hey, this is probably it's for sure a closer game. Who knows what happens? But I've got the Eagles, you got the Niners. I don't remember if we did a recap of the AFC last week, but in order to make sure people hear it, just give me your AFC.
Yeah, I don't think we talked about playoff contenders in the AFC, but you want 1 through 8?
Yeah, go through your divisional winners and then your wild cards.
They got the Chiefs number 1, Bengals number 2, Bills number 3, Jags number 4, Jets getting the first wild card spot, Ravens, and then finishing up with the Chargers.
Wow. So for me, where I'm at, I got the Chiefs 1, I got the Bengals 2, I've got the Jets 3.
Okay.
I think the Jets win the division.
Okay.
Talked about that in last week's episode. And then I've got the Jags.
So very similar, just flip-flopping the Bills and Jets there.
Just flip-flopping. So for me, I've got the Bengals playing the Dolphins. And
well, who's your other 2 wild cards?
So Dolphins, Ravens, Bills.
Dolphins, Ravens. Oh, you got 3 teams from the AFC East.
From the AFC East.
Okay.
And it's more speaking to, I think that's one of the better divisions. Like, I don't see, after the Jags, I don't see anyone out of the AFC South getting it. The only the AFC North, you get the Ravens. I don't see the Steelers or the Browns getting it. And then out of the West, it's really a toss-up between the Chargers and the Raiders in my mind.
Yeah.
I just think that both of those teams, in typical fashion, they'll find ways to not get in.
Okay.
In the AFC East, I just think it's stacked.
I wouldn't be surprised like if you took the Chargers out for me and added the Dolphins in there. I do think the Dolphins could be playoff contenders for sure.
Yeah, so I've got the Bengals playing the Dolphins, of which the Bengals win. I've got the Jets playing the Ravens. The Jets get the win here. And then I've got the Jags playing the Bills, and the Bills get the win, which leads to my divisional of the Chiefs versus the Bills and the Bengals versus the Jets. And what's your divisional looking like?
Yeah, so I've got the Bengals beating the Chargers, the Bills beating the Ravens, and then the Jets beating the Jags. And then, so it's Chiefs versus Jets, Bengals versus Bills.
God, sign me up.
Dude, those are going to be some great games.
Oh,
that's
100%.
If the Jets show up like we both expect the Jets to show up, those are going to be great games.
So who do you have in the divisional round?
So I got the Chiefs beating the Jets.
Okay.
And then the Bengals beating the Bills, so it's Chiefs versus Bills, another AFC matchup.
Chiefs versus the Bills.
Sorry. Chiefs versus Bengals.
Okay,
Chiefs
I was about
versus
to
Bengals for an AFC rematch.
So, which I mean, every time that they've met, it's great.
Yeah.
Like, you can't sit back and argue with the quality of those games. Who do you got winning?
So I've got the Bengals taking it.
So your Super Bowl is
Niners, Bengals.
Which third time that would happen in each of those Super Bowls.
Same result.
Oh, okay, so you're already saying 49ers are going to win.
Yep.
Which it's not. I mean, when you look back in Super Bowl history, for those who know anything about football, all of those games, 49ers, Cincy, came down to the final drive.
They've been great games.
Phenomenal.
Yep.
So it would be, I love, anytime you turn on a Super Bowl and it's a great game.
I've got one thing going against me, which is I can't remember the stat. I have to look it up, but it's like anytime a young quarterback has made it to the Super Bowl
on his rookie deal, he doesn't go back.
He's never even returned to the big game. Not even like won it or anything. Like never even been back to the Super Bowl. So historically, the Bengals are never making the Super Bowl while Joe Burrow is the quarterback.
I think it's when a guy on his rookie deal goes and loses the Super Bowl, they never go back because Big Ben
won the Super Bowl
on his rookie deal, and then went back.
Yeah.
But if you lose it, that's where you put yourself
if you lose it, you never even go back to the big game. But I think if you go back and look at some of those guys, I think Joe Burrow, I think they do it. The Bengals are too good of a team to not ever make the Super Bowl as long as he's there with the weapons they have around him.
Yeah, once they have to pay him and Chase and other guys, that's where it will really take. And that's why guys struggle to make back is once you start paying the quarterback, it hurts the other positions. But for me, I got the Chiefs versus the Bills, Bengals versus the Jets. And for me, I know this is bold to say, this is upset city for the AFC because I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just a little bit of bias. I got a buddy who's a big Bills fan. I think the Bills, this is the matchup the Bills have won it since that amazing game against the Chiefs. I think the Bills go into Arrowhead and beat the Chiefs. Like, I just think that they ball out. It's the team that they've won it. I think the Bills win.
I feel like the Bills are kind of like turning into the Cowboys, where like they've been great, but they just find ways to lose these games.
They lost 4 straight Super Bowls.
Yeah, 2 against the Cowboys.
Yeah, 2 against Cowboys. I know that's taken a huge shot at the Chiefs. It's one of those ones where I think it's so difficult to repeat. It happens. Don't get me wrong. There's plenty of years that you can look back, whether it's the Dolphins, the Steelers, the Broncos in the 90s. Mm-hmm. Like, teams have repeated, and I would give the Chiefs a great chance to do it, but it is very difficult, and it's more likely that they don't repeat than that they do. That's why I have the Bills beating them. And then I got the Jets beating the Bengals.
Wow.
And it is because, for me, this is the year that the Jets and the AFC, we talk about the defense of the Eagles and the 49ers. The Jets, to me, have by far the best defense in all the AFC.
And listen, like, if you want to win a game in the AFC, like, showing up with a solid defense is the way to do it.
Yes.
And we've seen the Chiefs get beaten. If all of us, they just have to have a slightly bad game on offense, which a good defense could make that happen. And they're going to, they could lose.
Yes.
It happens every year.
And I think that Rodgers not having to play the 49ers, which is his kryptonite, getting to the AFC.
My God, could you imagine the Jets get to the Super Bowl against the Niners, and then the Niners beat Rodgers in the Super Bowl?
Yeah. Rodgers owns the Bears, but the 49ers own Aaron Rodgers.
He would retire.
Oh, I would feel awful.
That would be amazing.
But it would be
I
hilarious.
hope that happens. I want to change my picks.
Somewhere right now, Jets fans are like, please, dear God, if we make it to the Super Bowl,
they're going to be the biggest Eagles fans.
Yeah,
they're going to be like, kill the Niners.
Play anyone but the Niners. It's Aaron Rodgers' kryptonite.
My God.
But for me, this is where I know this is big. I got Bills, Jets, AFC Championship. I've got the Jets, and I know that I told a guy the other day who's a big Jets fan, he was like, who do you think is going to win and go to the Super Bowl from the AFC? And I was like, I don't know if you want me to say it. And he goes, please don't say the Jets.
Don't jinx it.
He's like, don't say it. He goes, my dad has passed away, but for his entire life, he's been a Jets fan, and he got to watch them win with Namath when he was a kid.
Gosh.
He goes, and I think that's why he's in the ground today. He literally said that, and I was like, man. But he just said the Jets always find ways to lose. For me this year, I love Robert Saleh.
Oh, yeah.
Tremendous coach. I think their defense is going to win them games. I just think that they've always been missing that quarterback.
They won games last year.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. But they had no offense.
Correct. I mean, you look, the Jets had, I think it was like 6 or so one-loss games that or one-score games that they were on the bad end of. Like, I remember they lost to the Patriots because the Patriots at the end of the game took that punt back.
Yeah.
And it's just like, those are the type of things that the Jets have done that now that they have Rodgers, their question comes down to their offensive line. And that's why I have them going to the Super Bowl from the AFC is I just don't think there's any defense in the AFC that's able to expose the Jets' weakness, which is their offensive line. So for me, I've got the Jets playing the Eagles in the Super Bowl, but this is where, yet again, it runs out for the Jets because of that. Like, when I take a look at the Eagles' defense, that's what's the kryptonite to that line. Yeah. And I've got Jalen Hurts.
Sadly,
going
even
back.
If it was the Niners, I think it'd be the same result.
Same result.
They're just so good on defense.
And I think that this year you're not going to have the field being a factor. I think the NFL learned that mistake from last year with the grass that was like everyone was slipping. Now, both teams had to play on it. The Chiefs won the game. I just think it is very interesting.
You don't like that to become the storyline of what happened.
So they're not going to make that mistake again. So I've got the Jets playing the Eagles, Eagles winning. You've got the 49ers beating the Bengals.
Yep.
And so ultimately we both think NFC is going to reign supreme this year, which is interesting. I mean, we'll see. We'll keep track of our records. We'll bring it back at the end of the year and show you guys. For our next segment, what we're doing is to transition from predictions. It's going into another prediction, which is our fantasy. What we both thought of is like there's so many people out there that give predictions of like, hey, here's who to draft in the first, second, third, all these different picks. What we want to call it is our dark horse segment, which is more these are the guys that we think are not going to be those guys that you're going for early, but they're going to
not starters.
Correct.
On a weekly basis.
They're guys that are going to be on your bench that I think over the course of the year you're going to find playing more and more because they're going to be producing those points. So what we did is we just did it straight up. We went quarterback, running back, 2 wide receiver, and a tight end. We didn't do defense and we didn't do kickers because ultimately, let's be honest, those positions really don't matter if you don't have the number one guy. And even then, if they don't get any field goals or, the defense is playing a good team, it hurts. So for me, I'm starting off, we talked about it earlier, my quarterback's Jared Goff. Like
That's a great pick.
I think that he is that guy that ultimately they are going to sling it this year. And them losing.
They slung it last year.
Yeah, 100%.
But
them losing Swift and Williams helps Goff's output in fantasy because now that they have Gibbs is out of the backfield back. Like they're going to throw it to him a lot. They're going to put up points. The Lions are going to score. And Jared Goff, I think he'll on average 300 yards and 3 touchdowns every single game. That's just my opinion.
Mainly because, like we talked about, their defense is kind of suspect. So that's the way they're going to have to win games because they're going to get scored on. So they're going to have to do like I said, the Chiefs thing where it's just like, yeah, our defense is just going to be there. We're just going to win the game because we're just going to score 50 points.
Yeah.
And obviously Goff is going to be a, recipient of those points.
100%. So who you got at quarterback?
I love the Jared Goff pick, and I would have picked Jared Goff as well. I'm just to be different though. I'm gonna pick Derek Carr. And again, I think he's got the weapons around him, and their schedule is so easy. I think he can put up big numbers, right? They lost games. We're not talking about NFL stuff here, right? This is fantasy, and we all know that like the fantasy aspect
is different,
completely different than actually winning games and such. They can lose tons of games, but I think Derek Carr is going to put up a ton of points for someone who you're not drafting.
A far easier schedule, and that
exactly.
is what matters.
And again, we're not talking about Patrick Mahomes and Joe Burrow and Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts, right? Like these are guys that like you maybe pick him up late in the last.
Or if you miss out on those guys, like if you don't have Mahomes or one of those like Burrow, Allen guys.
If you wait till like round 8, 9, 10 of your draft or whatever, and you're either picking like, hey, I've got a stacked other roster and I just need somebody to fill it, or you're looking for like a backup who can, maybe fill in later, I think Derek Carr is going to be the guy.
I mean, ultimately, I'd take Derek Carr over Russell Wilson. I'd take him over Kirk Cousins. Like, there's a lot of guys that I would take Carr over, which I think is exactly the point of sort of this dark horse. It's like, these are the guys that if you miss out on those first few guys, this is the guy that I would go target. Who's your running back?
So, Samaje Perine, and hear me out on this. And the reason why I say this is he can be super, he might not even get drafted in a lot of drafts, right? He might be a guy that's like on waivers when you start the season. But I don't think Javonte Williams is the guy in Denver. I think that he's coming off the injury. I don't think he's that comfortable. I don't even really think he's that good from a production standpoint. And Samaje Perine has shown on the Bengals backing up Joe Mixon that dude, he can be the guy. When Joe Mixon got hurt and Samaje Perine comes in, he's killing it.
He was a beast coming out of Oklahoma in college.
He catches the ball out of the backfield. He's big enough to run it between the tackles. again, for someone who I feel like won't even get drafted in some of the drafts, he could end up being the starter on the Broncos by the end of the season, putting up number one type numbers as a guy that didn't even get drafted. And I think from like a value standpoint, that's literally what a dark horse is.
The leash with Javonte is super short, and I would agree with that. Like, I think that he was a guy that was drafted not by Peyton. Peyton brings in P. Ryan, so the table is set for exactly for what you're saying to happen. So I completely agree with it. For me, my running back is Isaiah Pacheco, and
Okay.
this is it's a delicate pick because they have so many weapons in that Chiefs backfield, and I get people are going to say McKinnon is the guy for catching, and if you're in a PPR league, maybe staying away from Pacheco, but when I look at Pacheco run, you made this point, and I 100%, that is the perfect analogy.
Runs angry.
He is a mini Adrian
Mini
Peterson.
AD.
And when you said that, you watch him and you're like, dude, this is the same guy. The Chiefs want a running back that runs hard because they haven't had it. Like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, great at LSU, but he just pan out.
Didn't fit the system. Yeah.
Correct. When you watch Pacheco, and a lot of Chief players have said it, like, this dude is the real deal. Like, he is running hard. Like, that's who I see. And I think that from a running perspective, if he takes off like I think they will under that offense, he's a great guy to have on your bench that when, hey, you're not able to start one of your starters, that's a great fill-in, especially in the flex or even a starting running back on a bye week position for me. For wide receiver, you talked about P. Ryan being that guy that comes in because of injuries. That's my guy for my first wide receiver, which is Quentin Johnston with the Chargers.
Ooh.
And it's because Keenan Allen and Mike Williams
Always get hurt.
Yeah, it's like Michael Thomas. It's not a matter of if, it's just when they're going to go to the IR. I can see Quentin Johnston being that guy that's the number one receiver.
Chargers are slinging it, dude.
Slinging it.
Herbert's great.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, it's funny because I've already heard a lot of people talking about Quentin's been dropping a lot of balls this preseason, which
Who else was dropping a lot of balls?
Jamar Chase.
Yeah, exactly. He's a number 2 going off the board right now in every
yes,
draft. So.
the only guy beating him out was his teammate at LSU, Justin Jefferson.
Yeah.
But like Chase is the real deal. I think Johnson's going to see
Another
a lot of those
example
throws.
of like preseason matters and preseason doesn't matter.
Oh,
like
100%.
Like they make a big deal out of these things, and it's like just chill out. Give him a second.
He was catching them all in college.
Yeah.
He'll be fine. Who's your wide receiver going?
So this one's kind of iffy. Kadarius Toney, if he's healthy, right? He got injured. I don't necessarily know how his season's going to pan out as far as the injury goes, but if he's healthy, the amount of skill that this guy has on that kind of offense with Patrick Mahomes, and I know he's competing for the ball, but they score so many points that by being that number one guy, he could literally be like the Tyreek Hill. Now, he's not Tyreek Hill, but from a fantasy standpoint, he could with Patrick Mahomes throwing the ball if he stays healthy.
If he stays healthy,
Because
100%.
they've been looking for that guy to fill that spot.
Showed
since
it in the
Hill
Super
left.
Bowl.
Yeah.
Like
And he could do it.
Yeah, for sure. And on that offense, he has the potential to really be that guy that they utilize Hill like, where you put him in open space and Andy Reid finds ways to get those guys into that type of open space. He is super dangerous when healthy, which, I mean, it's a great pick. For me, my number 2 wide receiver is, if you're going to make a bet, you do it just like my boy, Calvin Ridley.
Yeah. So I got Calvin Ridley there as well.
Perfect. So I just think that Ridley is this guy that he didn't come off an injury. Like, he was banned by the NFL for a year. So my man is fresh.
Yeah.
Like,
And it looks like it, too.
the healthiest
in
he's ever been.
videos.
And he's catching everything, especially, I get it. It's Instagram, TikTok. They're all only showing the best plays. He was amazing with the Falcons.
Oh, yeah. I mean, stats-wise, like in that little span that he was playing, he was top 10.
Yes, you're a guy that you're like, hey, I got to go get Ridley as my second wide receiver.
Yeah.
I think the same this year. Like, I think under the Jags, they're going to sling it. They have Christian Kirk. They have Evan Ingram. They have guys that they're there. I think they sling it. And so, I mean, it's funny. We both have him. For me, the guy I was debating putting there, he is more like what I would say is like a super, super dark horse, is Justin Ross from Kansas City.
Who?
Yeah, exactly. I get it. For those of you who don't know, I got to see it firsthand. So I was there when Clemson and Bama met in the championship game in California. I was not even born at the beginning of World War II when Germany went through Poland, but that's what it was that night. Like Clemson just absolutely steamrolled Alabama. Alabama had no answer. And a huge part of that was Justin Ross.
Yeah.
Like when you look at his size, the Chiefs don't have that. Like 6'5", big guy, runs fast, really versatile with the ball. Hurts his neck and his back at Clemson, goes undrafted. Chiefs pick him up undrafted. From there, breaks his foot last year. He's been making a lot of plays, and I just think that if he shows any of that potential that he had at Clemson in the Chiefs offense, they're going to put him on the field.
Yeah, I mean, same logic with my Kadarius Toney pick. Like, if someone can come out and be that number one guy, receiver-wise, obviously Travis Kelce's the number one, but, like, if they can be the number one wideout, when you got Patrick Mahomes throwing you the ball, you have the potential to be amazing in a fantasy standpoint. No, I get it.
So that's a guy that I would just say if dudes start getting hurt with Kansas City or you see him start getting play time, if you have an extra bench spot, throw him in. And especially like a dynasty league, go grab him because that's a guy that I think that you want to hold on to just to see what happens. It's a risky pick, but if you're sitting back and you're like, oh, I'm going to pick, Mooney or someone from the Bears, I would probably just say go with Ross. It will be more of a home run threat later if it actually comes to fruition.
with the expectation of like you're probably gonna have to sit with that dude on your bench for a few weeks, maybe like multiple
whole year
weeks
up until the
before
end.
he starts doing something. Yeah, that's
yeah.
fair.
Who's your tight end?
So tight end's tough, right? Because tight end is thin, right? There's Kelsey. There's like a middle group of good, maybe 4 guys, and it's kind of just like scraps for else. So I've thrown out a couple names. I think Cole Kmet has an option to be pretty good now that they've got some, they got DJ Moore on the outside. Tight ends are always good dump down, receivers to help out a young up and coming quarterback, which Justin Fields needs to kind of get in that throwing thing. So I think Cole Kmet's a good option. Mike Gesicki has shown a lot of good potential. And then this is like my sleeper dark horse is Greg Dulcich for the Broncos.
Who? Yeah.
So if you go back and look at like a 3 or 4 span game, Greg Dulcich was putting up like tight end 1 type numbers because he was scoring a lot. So if Russ can kind of have a little bit of a resurgence,
which he should.
He should. I agree. And that's kind of why I'm putting him out there for people to look at. Like if you miss on all those guys or you're just trying to stream tight ends, I think Greg Dulcich is going to be one of those guys who's available easily for you to go get that you could put in. And again, you're not getting Kelsey numbers, right? If you want Kelsey numbers, you got to go draft him in the first round.
Well, it's a great pick when you think about, that is a true great dark horse because of Peyton's offense. Like you think back, Jimmy Graham, like he's going to utilize the tight end.
They're running through tight end, yeah.
100%. So, that's a great pick. I think it's definitely someone for people. I would argue that most people couldn't even name you who the Denver tight
Broncos tight end was, yeah.
So, for me, mine is a little bit playing off of that. It's a system-based. He has a rookie quarterback, which puts him in a little bit of a hurt, but Dalton Schultz going to the Texans me.
Great pick.
I think you did great things with the Cowboys, which anytime you're a star with the Cowboys, it's putting you in a highlight because that team's terrible every single year. Thanks for the last 25 years of just memes. But, DeMarco Ryan's coming in from San Francisco, utilize the tight end in Kyle Shanahan's offense. They're bringing an offensive coordinator from San Francisco in order to be Slowick, to be their offensive coordinator. I just think that he's going to get a lot of looks. And with a rookie quarterback, tight end has always been that position that's like when you don't know where to go, find the tight end.
Yep, yeah, 100%. That's my Cole Kmet logic. Get it. Totally get it.
So
makes sense.
That's just sort of who I see with our dark horses. And then you brought up a good point because I think it's something that we're going to look at right now, which is every single year there's rookies that are there to be had. And maybe not the Bijan Robinsons that you're like, hey, this is that guy that you want to take up front, but there's running backs and wide receivers, quarterbacks out there that you just, hey, this is a good guy to have on the roster. So who are you taking with your rookie quarterback that if you got stuck with taking a rookie, this is the guy that you're going to put it on?
So, it really comes down to, the big three of C.J. Stroud, Richardson, and then Bryce Young. But I think C.J. Stroud, I think he's the best of the three. I think offensively, he has the most options around him I know the Texans aren't great, but I don't know. I just think he has the ability to make the most impact on a team, throughout the season.
That makes sense. I mean, I have a hard time arguing with that. For me, look, I get it's the preseason. The biggest thing is the Panthers and the Texans, to me, have bad offensive lines. And that over the course of the year takes a toll. For me, the Colts have the best offensive line. Now, I would personally put Anthony Richardson below Bryce Young and CJ Stroud in terms of playing ability, just because I don't think he came from a great system in Florida. I think he's been hyped up because of his athleticism, which is why, from a fantasy perspective, not in terms of wins of the teams, but from a fantasy perspective, like I can see this dude running and getting a bunch of he's a big dude on the goal line, like him running it in. I can see happening. So I just think from a fantasy perspective, Anthony Richardson's my guy at quarterback.
That's fair.
So running back for me, this is where I sit back. There's really two guys that we were sort of talking about earlier. My favorite right now is Devon Achane with the Dolphins.
Yeah, he's great.
And you talked about it with the Dolphins backfield.
I could see him, and this isn't because he's that much better than the other guys, but like Mostert and Wilson have kind of had injury issues throughout their careers, and if they don't necessarily produce or they get kind of hurt and he fills in and all of a sudden they're like, yo, this guy is good, which he is, he could end up being the starter.
And he is fast.
Yeah.
Like he has that fifth gear that you look for, that he's going to break it. Like especially through the preseason, watching him like runs hard. He played in the SEC with Texas A&M. Like he's a good running back. It's not that he's untested. Like this guy has seen that type of just NFL defense, like playing against Georgia and other teams. I think he's the guy in Miami that if he continues to get looks and fed, he's great for that offense. Like Mike McDaniels will find a way to get him the ball. The second guy that we were talking about, which before I get to that, who was your other running back?
No, I mean, so like it came to like I love Achane. I think Bijan is the obvious pick just because they drafted him so high, and anytime they draft a running back that high in the NFL draft, he has a good season, especially from a fantasy standpoint because he gets the volume. I think Gibbs is another fantastic rookie coming in, and the thing about Gibbs, maybe not from like a fantasy standpoint because he's going to have to split time with David Montgomery, but from an actual production value, I think that helps Gibbs because he's not going to be expected to carry all the load,
100%.
right? They can kind of run with the hot hand. David Montgomery can do a lot of the running plays where Gibbs can do a lot of the
but
passing
they're talking
plays.
about putting Gibbs in the slot.
Or as I say, they can run them both at the same time for that exact reason. I think Gibbs is going to have a huge impact.
I totally see that. My second one, this is a guy that I think, based upon where the team is right now, with an injury to the starter who's coming back, this guy, we've already talked about the comparison, and we'll get to that. I hate saying it because of the team that he's on, but I love the player, is Deuce Vaughn. Like, Deuce Vaughn, I get it. He is, he's 5'5". He's 175 pounds, probably soaking wet. But he runs hard.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to do this just because it's like a small guy, but it's such an easy comparison to go, okay, you don't like Deuce Vaughn? Who was the same size of Deuce Vaughn that was great in the NFL for a long time? Darren Sproles. You know where Darren Sproles went to college? Kansas State. Where did Deuce Vaughn come out of? Kansas State. I mean, it's like the same person, right? And did Darren Sproles, because he was small, let that limit him?
No, he was an amazing back.
He was great, right? People were fighting over to get Darren Sproles, right? So, like, I could see that. I mean, I get it. Like, size in the NFL matters, but usually those small guys are like built more compact and they can be tougher than some of the other guys. So
and
it's
I think
harder to get hit
yes.
as hard as, someone like Derrick Henry who can get chopped down at the knees a lot more easily.
Well, it's harder for a bigger guy to get on a Sproles or Vaughn level to really put a shot on him. And,
especially when they're as elusive as someone like Deuce Vaughn is.
And Vaughn's been showing, I mean, I get he's not been playing against first-string defenses, but he's still playing against guys who are in the NFL and making them look like he's in high school again.
He's explosive.
Yeah. So for me, that's a guy that I take a step back and I say, look, with Pollard being hurt, Ronald Jones, who's who's their other guy in Dallas that we were talking about that came from, it's
Rojo.
Yeah, Rojo. Rojo, I think, has already been suspended for first few weeks. Like, I think that Vaughn's going to get some looks, and I wouldn't be surprised if through the first few weeks, like, he's getting enough looks that justify him getting into the game throughout the rest of the year. But that's ultimately with me, with running back. What about for you, rookie wide receiver?
So it really comes down to two, Njigba and Jordan Addison. I think personally Njigba's probably got the better skill set. I love Addison, and I'm biased from the USC standpoint.
But I mean, Biletnikoff winner. Like, he was the best wide receiver.
I'm going to take Addison, and it's not because I think he's necessarily the better receiver. I think they're very close in skill set, but it's simply because Addison's filling in that number 2 role. And from a historical standpoint, when you have someone like Justin Jefferson on the other side, he draws so much coverage and so much attention, the number 2 guy gets to feed. And Addison's going to, benefit from that.
And it'll be hard for Njigba to get that number 2 role.
Exactly, because he's competing against Metcalf and Lockett, right? So, like, just from a volume standpoint, I think Addison's going to be on the field more than Njigba, unless the Seahawks simply just go like, we're running 3 wide receivers, on every single play.
Yeah, I mean, we both had those 2 players talking about. The third guy that I'll bring in is someone that they've struggled with picking wide receiver in the first round. They have not found their guy. This guy, at least through training camp, has shown a lot of promise, which is Zay Flowers with the Ravens. I think it's someone that the Ravens offense, Lamar Jackson when healthy is great. Like, they're going to sling it. I would stay away. Whatever you do, don't pick up OBJ on your fantasy, because it's always that false hope that you're expecting to see him in a Giants uniform.
He's not going to finish the season healthy.
I mean, you brought it up. I didn't even know this.
Doesn't even have an ACL.
Yeah.
It's non-existent.
Yes.
Like, he can't play in the NFL without an ACL.
He is, but it's one of those ones. It's a ticking time bomb.
Not very long.
Yeah, exactly.
Not going to play very long.
OBJ is not that guy that you're going to look at to put up those number 1 wide receiver numbers. He is like that second guy that he'll have some catches. He's sort of like Adam Thielen under Justin Jefferson. Like, he's going to have some catches, but at no point are you going to be like, I'm starting this guy every week. For me, Zay Flowers, he is going to be their number 1 guy. Like, and I think
that's a good point.
I think that he's going to see a lot of targets. It's just a matter of, can I find the Ravens have had so much success picking guys that eventually they're going to hit on wide receiver. I do think that this is the guy that they hit on with Zay Flowers. I think he goes off. Ultimately, for me, that's where the pick is with wide receiver out below Jordan Addison. I think, like you said, Addison's going to get to see a lot. He looks phenomenal in preseason. He had that diving catch it was incomplete because they said he didn't get his second foot down, but in terms of his playmaking ability, I love Addison in that role.
He's just got to slow down driving through school zones.
Oh my gosh, out there looking like Henry Ruggs. For me, tight end, there's only 3 out there, rookies.
Yeah,
you got Dalton Kincaid, Sam Laporta, and Michael Mayer. So Kincaid's with the Bills, Laporta's with the Lions, and Mayer is with the Raiders. So, I mean, for you sort of talked about this with Knox, and I think it's a good point to bring up.
Yeah, I mean, his brother passed away last year, I think, and I don't know. It could just be me looking into it, or I had him on my fantasy team or something. But he didn't seem like he was the same player since. Like, it seemed like he came back and wasn't all there. So Kincaid, I think he's still competing with it. So I wouldn't pick him as my who I think is going to have the biggest impact, but I think he's the best tight end that came out, but he's still competing for the job.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the other 2 teams with Laporta with the Lions and Mayer with the Raiders, that's their number 1 guy. Like,
yeah,
the Lions had Hawkinson trade him to the Vikings. I think that Laporta's been getting a lot of great reviews, and I think in that offense they sling it, and I trust Goff more than I do Jimmy G to really – and it's not really just Jimmy G, it's also McDaniels and that whole – I mean, it's the only guy that, well, up until the last week of the year when it didn't matter and the Texans just gave it away, was the only guy that lost to an ESPN analyst in McDaniels.
Guy off the street.
Yeah, so ultimately for me – that's where I would go to is Sam Laporta. I think he's a steal of a tight end that you can get later in a round. Because, I mean, we talked about outside of you taking Kelsey number 1, tight end is very unpredictable. You're just trying to get a guy that's going to get you like 5 points. Like,
it's Kelsey in the super tier. There's like 4 maybe guys in like the other tier who, if you don't get Kelsey, you want to get one of those guys. And then after that, it's just like you're scrambling.
But like I'm sitting here looking at teams and I'm like Tampa Bay, I don't even know who their tight end is. Like Arizona, I don't even know if they know what that position.
I mean, Zach Ertz, if he comes back.
If he comes back,
again,
but
you haven't heard that name in a few years.
Yeah,
So it's
Kyler
tough.
Murray out there wearing the man brawl to throw it to him. So those are the type of guys where like a Sam Laporta, I would take him over those guys just because that's going to be a good offense for him to fit in. But, ultimately that wraps up our NFC episode and just our NFL picks. So what you can expect from us is every single week we're going to make predictions on every NFL game. Separately, we'll make our own calls. We'll keep track of our records. We'll go off of the Vegas line. We'll go do, who we actually think is going to win the game, but especially when it comes to the line, where we think that shakes out. We'll keep records throughout the whole year. We'll do a prize at the end of the year. We'll announce that in a later episode, what we're going to do for that. But it'll be a little bit of fun and give you guys a little bit of backing of how we're actually doing. Because, I could easily be like 0-27, and you can be like, well, whoever he picks, I'll just take the opposite. Give yourself a little bit of advantage. That way you can see. Our next episode is going to be college. We're going to go through all of college football, the teams that actually matter. So if you're tuning in and you're a Vanderbilt fan, I'm going to go ahead and tell you. Yeah, sorry, dog. We're not talking about Vanderbilt this week and we're not talking about any week except when they play someone good and get the brakes beat off.
Yeah.
So
who they're giving a free win to, you mean?
Yeah. Who sold out Vanderbilt Stadium this week? Which it's funny bringing that up. I don't know if you know this. So Vanderbilt's doing renovations. Well, they're not done. And so they're playing at a high school field.
Yikes.
Yeah, which sums up Vanderbilt football to a T. We can't even sell out our own stadium because it's under renovation, so we'll just go play out a high school field because we know that maybe we'll have a chance to sell out that stadium. So
all 25 fans.
Poor guys. But ultimately, that wraps up our NFL episode. Thank you for joining the Football Talk Squadron. Please follow us on our social media accounts, which you can find all of that at footballtalksquadron.com. Ultimately, that wraps up our episode. Any parting words for us?
Nope. Appreciate you guys watching.
All right. Time to pull chalks, and we'll see you next week.